I would like to welcome all our panel speakers, a group of very distinguished panel speakers who come from very relevant and very current kind of business areas that will share with us the insights about this technology, digital economy, post-pandemic, as we are kind of hopefully walking towards the end of this so-called pandemic period. Since we have 9 speakers, we are going to get a lot of very strong and diverse views. This is where it will help us to grow. At the same time, we also need to keep certain discipline in terms of timing. So we have actually prepared some questions for the speakers. And I would like to quickly just mention that each speaker, for each of those questions, as we kind of approach those, you are given 2 minutes. And therefore, please go straight to the point. And therefore, it will help to benefit all the audience who are here physically, as well as those online. All right? Now, there are also a lot of this introduction information about the speakers that I would like to urge everyone to read on your own, simply because these are very illustrious personalities. Their CVs actually consist of half the book. So I'm not going to read it out, and I would like to ask you to do your reading, and therefore I'm going to go straight to the speakers. Now, this session, while we talk about digital technology and digital economy post-pandemic, we actually want to start with the first question, which is about technology. And technology has always been a topic of controversial, because some say that it's good, some say it's bad. And for example, the first application of blockchain technology is Bitcoin, and then China outlawed that for various reasons. And then, but the other countries also have embraced that. And in fact, there are also countries that has actually used that as their own legal tender. It means it's recognized as a currency. So this is a kind of a result of technology that is being either adopted, recognized, or rejected. So to the panelists, apart from the blockchain, there are many other new technologies. So I would like to pose to everyone on the list here, following the sequence according to the program book here. What do you foresee to be the next big thing affecting and impacting business, economy, government, and society in the next 3 years, especially by 2022? Only big thing. So 2 minutes, and I'm going to invite first Mr. Goh Peng Ooi. And the sequence is Mr. Goh Peng Ooi, Mr. Po Chin Loong, Mr. Pindar Wong, Ms. Mei Fung, Professor Barbara Meynert, and next is Mr. Actually Georg Chmiel, but then we have to call him Georg Chmiel so that people can call his name in a more so-called friendly manner. And then Matthew Chen, and Mr. Chu Jenn Weng, and last but not least, Mr. C.S. Goh, in that sequence, all right? So, the next big thing, Mr. Goh Peng Ooi to start first. Mr. Goh, please.
Good afternoon. I'm going to share some charts, and let's see whether they are the big things. So, can you all see the chart?
Yes, it's a slide.
Yeah. What I'm saying is the most important impact that. So I'm going to divide into three levels of thought. One is the highest thought, that is basically the impact of digitization, and digitization Now, and the first impact is actually partitioning of concepts and knowledge because of 1.0 origin. So everything can be partitioned in the world of 1.0. And of course, that widens up limits, simplify the methods in mental and physical exploration. And of course, that means opens up opportunities and risk. So all this leads to money printing, China's rise, supply-demand conflicts, market cap without profits, and so on and so forth. And of course, these are all big things. And this is basically hindsight. Now, there's one thing that it is not 1.0, that is COVID-19. And I hope that the mathematicians working on toposes will have big breakthrough in future in this so-called partitioning of the real and virtual world. Now, as to that the impact from that partitioning, and of course it went down to supply side, fund side, demand side, and I add in a new one, it's called system side. Now, that was because I was reading one of the top economists, Chinese economists, writing about the Chinese system and the cost of system. That was his topic. And I thought it's not just cost of system, but system side problem. And so supply side, I shouldn't spend too much time because it's well documented in all economic texts. If you read all of them, you should have a good feel of supply side. But fund side was the one that came up and hit everyone unprepared. And so, the money printing allows the fund side to prosper, and a lot of people making a lot of money in the games. And so the question is, what about micro level? And that could be interesting. And demand side, of course, is behavioral and very messy, but it drives the economy. So this is another one. And of course, you are looking at people like Grab, people like most of the young people are actually driving on, are trying to work on the demand side. Now, the difficult one is the system side, which was actually never recorded in economic texts. And for example, fishing net versus a fishing hook. What is actually which side that belongs to economy in economy? Container versus loose cargo, and central bank digital currency versus cryptocurrency. Now, we mentioned about two-pronged approach in looking at cryptocurrency, and you have central bank currency, which is basically system currency, while cryptocurrency is basically ad hoc currency. Now, population demand versus population bonus, and population bonus in China is declining, and now they have to depend on population demand equal to ASEAN as well. Now, so system is about streamlining 360-degree view, and of course, it has low cost to result ratio. And this gives rise to all the phenomena that you have seen, actually even the underlying phenomena of quantum physics and so on. So of course, it's a huge impact to our everyday life. Now, when we go down to macro level, it's become very unpredictable because it's combination of all these sites and combinations of all the partitionings. But one thing is very clear, at micro level, all of them are S-curves. They are all a curve to overcome, and really you can't predict what is the big thing tomorrow, because it is all the small things that add up together to form a big thing. But one thing we are very, very sure is that it's purpose-driven, supply side, demand side, and fund side and system side driven. But the trap is connective trap. We know what will fail us. That is called connective traps. And well, we're not talking about new things. Actually, car making is just the same purpose going into a new future, which could be electric car. And by the way, measurements are going to change. So what we used to think that profit earning ratios and so on is going to change. So there isn't going to be one or two or three big things. In fact, everything is going to change. All of them are going to be very significant. Now, and the chart that below is how I plan my organization. Basically, it is about getting ready to all the possible changes, and hopefully we can trap some big fishes. Thank you very much.
Wow. Thank you very much, Mr. Goh. And also, at least I should have highlighted that Mr. Goh, founder and chairman of Silverlake Group, and in fact, some may not know that Silverlake is actually the earliest technology, this unicorn in this region. So it's worthwhile celebrating, and we are very thankful to hear from Mr. Goh for the first question. Next, let's move on to Mr. Loong, who is the advisor of our Mac Solution, as well as CEO of the Yes Boss Corporation. Yes, please proceed.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Dato Moderator. First of all, thanks for having us. The three things that we need to think about, especially after this pandemic, right? I would like to bring you all just a little bit, just give me about 5-10 seconds. I don't know whether you all actually still remember something called Deep Blue, 20 years old, where computers are actually having chess with mankind. At the end of the day, computer won. But the last 20 years, nothing happened. Where AI comes in is 5 years ago, there's something called AlphaGo. I don't know whether you actually heard before. If no, write it down, search it. When go through AlphaGo is actually just a data sampling. Whatever things that we human beings think, we let computer know this is how it thinks. But is it the best? AlphaGo 0 then comes out about 3 years back. 3 years ago. What happened is we are going to tell the computer how we think. Because we think A, it becomes B. We don't give samples anymore. Guess what? In AlphaGo A, previously it took them 40 days for them to win a human being. The next one, it just took them 20 days. Guess what? I just did the check before I actually come here to share with you all. There's something called Alpha Star. We are using computer to fight with computer. Why I want to share this with all of you here today? Digital is not something that when we actually take out phones, we have the latest phone. We are in technology. I have the latest one. I have the fastest machines. I'm the latest. No. Machine learning. Artificial intelligence, always the important point. So this is the first thing, the first trend I would like to share when Dato Moderator actually asked. The next thing is because of the pandemic, where everybody at home, always swapping your phones, your machines. What is actually that change? User experience. When we want something, we want it fast. We can't wait for 5 seconds, we can't wait for 10 seconds. That's the trend. How can we resolve this? Automation, technology, which bring me to the next point that I would like to share with you all is robotics. When talking about robotics, there's hardware, there's software. So you guys need to actually think about these three trends that I would like to share, Dato Moderator. I know that the ring remind me of that, thank you. So maybe I'll share later more in the next question. Yeah, Dato Moderator.
All right. Wow, thank you very much. Wow, certainly you're one of the most disciplined person, just like when you had lunch. Next, we shall have Mr. Pindar Wong, who is the chairman of VeriFi Hong Kong Limited, to share the views. Pindar, please.
Thank you, Wei. I'll just keep it very short. As far as key technologies in the next 3 years, I think there is the overall trend of blurring between the real world and the virtual world, the 2D and 3D, specifically a technology called LiDAR, which basically can do 3D cut and paste. So we can capture images of objects in the 3D world, the real world, and import them into the 2D world. When we include the metaverse, it's going to be extremely confusing going from 2D to 3D and back again. Why back again? Because on the 2D to 3D side, we have 3D hologram technology, which is advancing very quickly, and obviously 3D additive manufacturing. So in sum, the blending of the 2D and 3D worlds is going to be a very big opportunity, and there are a suite of technologies that you should look into, starting with LiDAR. Thank you.
More than short and sweet. Thank you very much, Pindar. And next, Pindar actually talked to us from Hong Kong. Next is actually Fung, who is actually currently in the US and California. And that must be quite late at night for Meylin. And thank you so much for joining. And she is the chair and co-founder of People-Centered Internet. Could we hear from Meylin, please?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm calling from California, but I'm originally from Singapore. I've been here in Silicon Valley for the last 30 years. Especially in 2022, the effect that I expect we'll see after the disruption of supply chains with COVID, the whole area of global supply chains will get a lot of attention and will be much more tightly connected than ever. Reduced paperwork, online advanced evaluation of information will reduce and eliminate all unnecessary transportation delays. Warehouse automation is already happening. The spatial web is being used in the warehouses of Amazon, and I expect that to actually spread beyond the warehouses into the supply chain, the scheduling of ships, the meeting of farmers, crops, all of that stuff will reduce waste in the food supply. The second thing I want to bring up is the use of data cooperatives. People in Indonesia, especially women businesses, have had a lot of trouble accessing finance, and they've gathered together in cooperatives to reduce their credit risk so that they can get financing to grow their businesses. This idea of data cooperatives is also being used in disaster risk financing. And in the Caribbean and now in Southeast Asia, the 10 countries of ASEAN have signed an agreement to share the information related to weather and disasters in order to reduce the cost of disaster insurance. So these are some of the trends that I want to note. Thank you.
Thank you. That actually very interesting trend, the data cooperatives and disaster risk refinancing and so forth. Thank you. Next, we have Professor Barbara Meynert that comes in from either Thailand or Hong Kong, whichever location you may be in. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Dato. Good afternoon. I'm calling in from Bangkok. For me, one of the most interesting, in fact, I would say the most interesting trend is the net zero target, because that's the most critical issue for us, mankind. And to achieve that, we need the digital technologies that are now being developed and that will be developed. I just want to pick up one point on on green finance. We're going to need, China alone declare they will need close to 100 trillion US dollars to green the economy, to reach the net zero target. And when you add that up, it's going to be hundreds and hundreds of trillions worldwide. And here is where technologies have to come in, particularly on green finance and how to digitize that and how to make it work. So, you know, without even going into other technologies that we need on carbon capture, on carbon credits and trading thereof. So I think, just to go back, the net zero to me is the biggest trend facing mankind today.
Wow, when we've set a lofty target of zero target, net zero target, that's where trillions of dollars in the green finance. Right, thank you. That's a big thing. And let's move on to next one. Of course, is Georg Chmiel or Georg Chmiel.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's obviously not easy to come in after such esteemed speakers to come up with something new, but I'm lucky. My point hasn't been made yet. So I foresee that over the next 3 years, with signs already visible next year, the computer or digital and the human will grow even closer together. I'm not talking about the metaverse, which will happen where we are in different worlds. I'm talking about the fact that the ultimate operating systems for computers is not Android or iOS. It is the human body. And we will see more and more technology being immersed and injected into our body. So we will not have to run around and hold the phone. It will be inside us. I know it's a bit scary. There's a great video on YouTube if you want to watch it. There is a monkey being trained to use a joystick. And then over time, the joystick is actually disconnected from the computer, but the monkey has a little chip in his or her head. And ultimately, the monkey steers the computer via the mind. Next year, Neuralink will start human tests for this technology. Ultimately, good news is we no longer have to hold a phone. We can overcome a lot of diseases which have to do with neural issues. On the flip side, there's always downside with any new technology. That's what I can see, and we will see signs in the next couple of years.
Well, thank you, George. Looks like next time I'm going to call you through my mind because it's connected to some wireless digital system to your mind. That's the next big thing. Thank you very much. Next, we have, of course, you know, George is also the chairman of Juwai-IQI that makes investment in a lot of digital companies. So that gives some of the ideas. Next is actually Mr. Matthew Chen, also another good friend, who's the CEO of Sunline Holding Hong Kong, coming in from Hong Kong. Matthew, please.
Yeah, thank you, Dato, and also thanks again for KSI to invite me. In my opinion, probably one of the most prominent single biggest trend is decentralization. Right? Decentralization actually happens in all industries. You know, maybe starting with the industry that I'm most familiar with, the banking and finance industry. There's this notion of DeFi, right? Stands for decentralized finance, which built upon the technology of blockchain, which actually has a beautiful zero trust design. So this notion of zero trust design actually deem the middleman, you know, typically being the bank, probably is going to be obsolete. You know, there's no need for the trust into a bank to do transactions, right? So this is actually going to disrupt the banking and finance world tremendously, right? And also in a digital assets world, you know, there's I don't know whether you are watching the news about, you know, there's one of the record high of 92 million of non-fungible token-based artwork. It's called Merge. You know, one of the artworks by Park actually got auctioned recently, reached a record high for $92 million, right? Even in our daily life, in our work, you know, in our workspace, you know, in the middle of a pandemic, you know, we don't need to go to a centralized CBD area to work, right? We don't need to scramble together to work. So in my personal experience, you know, at least 50% of my workload is being shifted online. That's why we're talking on Zoom. And people are talking about, you know, metaverse and, you know, the use of VR and AR really actually make collaboration, albeit we are more decentralized, but collaboration can actually be more, right? So this is probably, I think, the most fundamental cross-sector trend that I see. Thank you, Dr. Wei. I'll stop there.
Wow, thank you, Matthew. Looks like we have a lot of zeros here, from a net zero target to now zero trust design. That means a system that's decentralized, that things get done without a central decision. And of course, a few other examples as well. Those will constitute the next big thing by, as mentioned by Matthew. Wow, thank you. Next, we have Mr. Chu Jenn Weng, who is the Managing Director, President, and CEO of ViTrox Corporation, Berhad, Malaysia. And also I want to congratulate Mr. Chu because ViTrox Corp has been added to the constituents of the FTSE for Good Bursa Malaysia Index and awarded the Company of the Year by the Edge Billion Ringgit Club. Your view on the next big thing?
Yeah, thank you, Dato moderators. I foresee two big things. I think it is also the right thing that impacting business and social in the next 5 years. These are smart factories and smart farming. As the world moves into the IR4 and AI, we foresee more manual processes across many industries being automated using robotic AI technology and big data. During this movement control and lockdown, during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, many companies and organizations realize that they're no longer able to heavily rely on cheap labors to run their business and operation. At the same time, smart factories with advanced robotic and machine intelligence play a crucial role in the industry world because automations and big data analytics make machine run automatically and autonomously, as well as make real-time monitor possible. Another big opportunity is, of course, in the smart precision farming. The COVID-19 pandemic have caused severe food shortage and domestic food price inflections across the globe. The agricultural commodity price index in the third quarter of 2021 is 17% higher than in January 2021 level. Higher retail price combined with reduced incomes mean more and more households are having to cut down on the quantity and quality of their food consumptions. Hence, it is very important that every country will need to work hard and collaboratively towards self-sufficiency in food through modern technologies. Many companies, including ViTrox, broadly practice the tech for good concept, which is also known as 善科技, with the aim to deliver a positive impact on the world around us. ViTrox aim to implement machine vision, robotic technologies, and circular economy technology to smart precision farming systems, not only to solve existing challenges such as unreliable use and excessive pesticides, but also to preserve the resources. We also see many great agri-tech companies from China that have successfully transformed the agricultural landscape in China at large scale. For example, Meynert, DJI, SAG, FJ Dynamics, and so on. I believe we from Malaysia and the Asian country can learn and collaborate with this company to accelerate the agriculture transformation in respected countries to achieve food self-sufficiency in the future. Thank you.
Wow, next big thing, as we have heard, smart factories where machines, automation, and perhaps robots produce goods for us, and smart farming with all this automation produce food for us. So goods and food will be provided by robots to us. And then another point is actually the use of 善科技, which is technology is a force of good. So there are a lot of applications. Right, thank you. Next, we move on to Mr. C.S. Goh, who is the co-founder, Chief Corporate Officer of MACROKIOSK Malaysia. CS, please.
Thanks, moderator. Good afternoon, guys. When I was first invited by KSI to speak on this topic, and I knew about the topic is about digital technology, I took it up without hesitation. MACROKIOSK is a digital technology company, and we help companies go digital. That's what we do every day. So this topic is very relevant to what we do, and it'd be great to share a bit more what we think about digital technologies. The thing about digital technology is that technology is never desirable, I think, but the application of technologies. So for the next 2-3 years, especially, it may go all the way to 5 years, it's about how we apply technologies to the current digital economy that we have. That will actually build the whole digital economy in place, in line with how the consumer behavior and mindsets change. As you probably know, the pandemic has probably expedited 5 to 10 years in terms of digital adoption by the consumers that's been happening, right? So for the next 3 to 5 years, what we see is that the 4 main components that will be happening in the digital world are communication, payment, CRM, and digital marketing. So these 4 components will actually form the crust of digital technologies, and the way companies, the sub-trends that are happening, that will apply into these 4 components, that will actually build the digital economy as a whole. Ultimately, when it comes to businesses, we all know that we need to acquire more customers, right? We need to grow customers, we need to retain the customers. And digital technology will help companies to do that. Communication, payments, CRM, digital marketing are the 4 main components that we foresee in the next 3 to 5 years. There will be a lot of sub-trend technologies we're building under these 4 components, and you'll see a lot of growth in these 4 segments. Thank you.
All right, thank you, CS. You talk about, essentially is to apply digital technology into this digital economy. So that actually will make the impact. Now we have heard about this, the next big thing. And you see, as I've assured you, it's going to be a very diverse view. Because we have heard about, the perspective of the supply side, demand side, funding side, and system side. And we have also heard of component technology, such as AI, robotics, and then we have the LiDAR, 2D, 3D, AR, VR, metaverse. I can continue to throw out a lot of those jargons, and perhaps we will need to kind of understand what it really means. And we also have some of the next big things that are actually a lot macro in nature, which includes, like, for example, everything is so tightly connected, the data corporations that provides funding for the SME, and how do we actually provide that kind of refinancing for disaster risk. We have also heard about the next big thing that includes net zero target for the emission. We have also heard about what they call that, the the zero trust design with decentralization, NFT, and so forth. Smart factories, smart farming, and applied technologies. With all these next big things, how do we apply in our business, as well as how would that be applicable to our economy? So the next question will be, how has the businesses and the industrial sectors, how have they been adapting to the new normal and the digital transformation? What are those imperatives? So this is the second question. In the same manner, now that we have gathered, we have warmed up already, so I would like to encourage all the speakers to speed up a bit more. So we start with Mr. Goh Peng Ui again.
Let me unmute myself. I hope you can hear me. Now, we have heard of technologies, we have heard of systems, and well, the one that confuses most is most likely technologies, because there are 70 over types of technologies. We have a company that specially actually monitor those technologies and put them together as a prototype. And the simple thing in life is actually our purposes. So we heard various purposes in applying technology. And of course, in between, we are influenced by economy, and that's the reason why you have supply side, demand side, fund side, and system side. Now, as we move forward, irrespective of what company we are or what purposes we are, obviously we can't be looking at all the technologies and trying out all the combinations, or we use mathematics or scientific means to analyze simulate what is the impact. I think most likely we are going to use common sense and to decide whether we focus on technology, or we focus on purpose, or we focus on system, or we focus on fund. And there are actually not more than 8 types of approaches if we combine technologies and purposes and economy. So this is my point. So there are not more than 8 types, and I believe by common sense, everyone can explore their path. And of course, each path is always unique to whether it is a country, whether it's a company, or whether it's an individual. So I think that has to leave to the individual entities.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Goh. Use our own common sense, and in this case, I believe it's also leadership, right? To focus on the purpose or the system or fund or the economy, right? Thank you. Then Mr. Po Ching Loong, please.
Okay, thanks, Dato Moderator. When talking about economics, it's about supply and demand. The pandemic totally break all this. The lockdown, what are we talking about, the supply and demand? So what I'm actually trying to share with you all here is like what actually the panelists previously said. You actually fast forward 5-10 years. What we can do. From technology per se is very simple. I would like to quote Nike mottos. Just do it. Just do it. If I were you, I'd give you 3 steps. Number 1, if let's say you have the young ones at home, gather them, have a dinner, talk to them. What can I do? This is number 1. Number 2, if you're running a big corporates, you should have an R&D team. I always recommend this. If not, number 3, talk to the professionals. It's a time to have coffee with them to move your business forward. If you don't care, nobody will. That's it, Dato Moderator.
Wow, okay. So just do it. And to do it, you need to kind of talk to the young people, especially young ones at home, and also have the R&D team because they are specialized people, or talk to the external professionals. Thank you. These are the imperatives. Next, may I invite Pindar Wong, please?
I think the imperative from the business side is to change a mindset from where things are to when. I think this focus on time is really what COVID-19 has done when it's destroyed or having us refactor our supply chains and demand chains. Because consumer behavior now has moved online because we can't physically meet together from the consumer side, that also translates into not being able to meet together on the producer side. If we include government as well, the biggest change here is, I think, the focus on time, given uncertainty. So the big change in mindset from not really caring where things are, because I think one of the trends is decentralization, to when orders can be fulfilled, I think that really should be the ruler by which we measure imperatives. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Pindar. So you touched on this dimension. The imperative is about time, right? When to do it, right? Because anyone could have done it, but when, right? Thank you. May I invite Mei Lin to take the next answer, please?
Okay, I want to mention the elephant in the room. The volatile situation, that is the increasing war of words between US and China. I believe Southeast Asia has a responsibility to show how to work with all sides so that trade can continue to flow. We have to work out ways to reduce the impact of the trade war by Southeast Asia's major trading partners. That is a big challenge ahead. I will run through a few other areas. Digital tracking of activities. Women taking leadership positions in ICT will mean that challenges in the home, families, the disabled, the digital home will emerge in the next few years. Beyond just the appliances, but the coordination of care for the elders, for young children. Digital natives, like our young friend here, he's talking about a whole new world. They will be starting businesses in new areas, monetization of digital assets, new ways of earning income from anywhere, and having companies that are spread around the world. Finally, Singapore spends 5% of GDP on health. This is due to decision modeling, population health analysis. The US spends 20% of GDP on health. So the use of statistics and modeling in health, transportation, education is going to transform these basic public services. And digital cooperation is being led by the United Nations on digital public goods and digital infrastructure. So the highways, the the information highways we've been talking about are going to start appearing. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mei Ling. You actually have taken to the very macro picture what the businesses and industrial sectors could actually adapt is that situation caused by the disruption of the U.S.-China trade war. How do we work with all sides? And interesting enough, you use the word a lot of tracking activities because of the availability of digital tools. And you touch on women, so it's as though women tracking activities, but it's not. Okay, and of course, all the other macro picture they will talk about is also like healthcare, transportation, of which this will also impact businesses and economy. Right, thank you. And next, I would like to invite Professor Barbara Meynert to share your thoughts.
For me, an imperative is clarity. We need to know the strategic for business. We need to know the priorities, the strategic priorities, and we need a clear roadmap. Because adaptation implies that we move from the old normal to a new normal. The problem is there's no new normal. In this new post-pandemic digital revolution world, we only have a whirlpool of things that constantly change. So, clarity to the maximum extent, I would say, is an imperative.
So it's no longer about technology. Thanks, Professor Barbara, because you're talking about having clarity in mind. Sounds like we need to do more meditation. Okay, we're moving on to George, please.
Yes, I mean, from my side, not all industries are always in the same state when they entered into this COVID period. COVID has accelerated the take-up and in some places made it mandatory. Now in the starting post-COVID times, it becomes a bit more optional. So we will see a slight swing back also for certain activities to the old normal when it comes to, for example, instead of ordering food online, going out more. That one is happening for sure. But at the same time, there's one fundamental thing which happened during COVID. I think society was changed also a bit. Society in terms of how they think about their politicians, how they think about trust, how they think about anything central which makes decisions for them to different degrees in different countries. And I do believe that while the medical impact of COVID has been felt, the psychological and societal impact of COVID will still come out over time, and it will kind of match this new world of metaverse and decentralization and shifting of trust away from central to decentral.
Thank you, George. Sounds like the question of trust, whether it's trustless or trust continue to come out, and because the behavior, mindset, all this has also changed, right? Thank you, George. Next, we have Matthew, please.
Yeah. So the question is, how different industries and economy sectors adapting to this new norm, right? So my answer to that is, I'll call it a revolution rather than evolution, right? So this revolution of digital transformation, especially when it's accelerated by pandemic, COVID-19, surely there are winners and losers, right, in different industries. So this is exactly the point I'm trying to make earlier. Although we are living in a more decentralized world, but a centralized government, the role of the centralized government is becoming actually more and more important, because they're, how the government's going to ensure, their social responsibilities and to help the more vulnerable, segments of the economy, it becomes more and more important, right? So, the zero trust technologies, all the ABCDs, metaverse, everything make the transaction communication is more efficient and cheaper, right? The costs become lower. So people is easier to collaborate, but there's always going to be losers. So the role of the government is really need to step in and ensure the social responsibilities is adhered to. And because at the end of the day, this revolution is a top-down approach, right? So it takes a lot of intervention from the government. So that's my 2 cents worth, Dato.
Yeah, very interesting, Matthew, because revolution usually comes from ground up, and what you are suggesting is this: have a top-down revolution, whereby give central government more power so that they can care for the rest, right? Well, thank you very much. And next, may I invite Mr. Chu Weng to share your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you. I think we are more resilient than we thought. According to McKinsey Global Survey, companies have accelerated the digitizations of their customers and supply chain interactions and their internal operation by 3 to 4 years for developed countries and 5 to 7 years for developing countries. And many of those, the changes could be here for the long haul. This company responded effectively to the crisis with the ability to streamline operation and automate manual process before the pandemics. Now I can order Penang Laksa located in the Aitam market just using my mobile phone. And I can't imagine that before the COVID. And also this is a very positive change, that companies that actually adopt digitization will be able to survive and strive for better. But on the other hand, the companies fail to adopt, and then they will actually wind down. These accelerations of the digital technology create abundant opportunities and new possibilities for businesses, educations, and community to make impactful change for a better world. ViTrox, as an example, make machine vision inspection systems and robotics that scan for abnormality in the semiconductor and other goods. However, our concern is that the IR4 may generate negative impact associated with engineer consumptions and carbon footprints. So today we have a clearer purpose to use technology to reduce waste of the natural resources on the planet and high labor dependency with the deployment of smart machines and systems in manufacturing of chip and productions of agricultural food. As mentioned by Dansi Lim Kim Yu, the outbreak is a punishment from God. The outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic is a grand lesson for us as human beings to realize that we are all connected and live in one global village that is deteriorating in many fronts. We are vulnerable regardless of how powerful we are as compared with the natures. Hence, we should stay humble, fearful, and grateful about all other living beings and the natures. There's no better time than now that we need to rethink how business, technology, economy should run for the betterment of the majority and not for the generating huge profit for a few big companies around the world. Technology for good, enterprise for good, and economy for good are the new trend for good post-pandemic era to achieve common and sustainable prosperity within and beyond country. I believe this is the right time forward and before it is too late. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chu. You said that everyone has seen acceleration of digital transformation, anything from 3 years to 7 years, faster than what it should be. And then you have used ViTrox as an example of the, all this, everything for good, and ViTrox for good. All right. Next, we have this CS to share with us.
You can have the greatest technologies, but if it doesn't help your business, it's probably not a good technology. So don't be afraid to apply technologies to meet your business objectives. Set the objectives and use technologies to meet them. Use it to acquire more clients, grow your clients, retain your clients. And how do you know whether it really helps your business? Ultimately, it's about improving your customer experience, your customers' convenience to getting your product and services, and ultimately, basically, to convert more potential customers to sales. So the technologies are out there. You just got to apply them to your benefits.
All right, yes, thanks. Yeah, apply technology immediately and for whatever our purposes, right? So we have actually heard the whole, long list of the imperatives that businesses could actually look into, like focusing on the purposes, just do it, and then the mindset, and also be aware of the macro picture, like trade war and so on, have clarity of the strategy, and then must adopt the mind change, adopt the digital transformation, and apply technology. These are all the imperatives. Now, we want to actually crank up speed further. Now, you see, not everyone will benefit from this whole big global trend and technological advancement. And technology, while it's actually a force of good, there are some who could actually be left behind. So what are those sectors that are vulnerable, and which one will thrive? I think it's time to see that the world is going to be yin and yang. There's some group that will benefit greatly, some groups that will actually fall behind, all right? And what are those intervention measures that the government or some of the regional groupings could do in order to kind of rebalance the situation? And with that, I would like all the speakers to also share your views. Starting from Mr. Goh, please.
Well, if you look at Japan, and they actually have gone through multiple cycles of reinventing themselves. So there is no such thing as which one will drop off, which one will not drop off. But more importantly is you must know why you exist. So your purpose. And making sure the how of the purposes are not the same all the time. One how can easily kill the other how. And a good example is camera. Used to be Fuji camera, Fuji films and so on. And that how overnight it become digital film and Fuji is gone. So the purpose remain the same. It's actually catching an image. So as long as you stick to the purpose and keep on reinventing the hows and catching up with all the technologies and make sure how the how are in line. And of course, the last part, which is the most difficult part, is when. Well, digital technology was invented in 1974 by Xerox, but then it was much later that it became commercial. So it's actually as simple as sticking to the purpose, reinventing the how, and make sure gauge the timing and survives.
Oh, okay, very powerful. Hold steadfast to the purpose, reinvent the how, and also master the when, the timing. Thank you, Mr. Goh. Next, Mr. Poh, please.
Yep, thanks, Dato, moderator. If you ask me which industry will get impacted, guess what? My answer is all. Including my own technology. I own some technology firm for 20 years. We need to change as well. If we don't change, I'm not scaring all of you. Like what the ViTrox guys, our friends have said, you are no longer relevant. The next question is those grouping. Like this morning, we actually heard about RCEP, CPTPP, One Belt, One Road. No, those are the things. Can it actually help? Yes, definitely the answer is yes. It's bilateral agreements that we're actually looking for. Is the fair agreements between two parties. I give you a very good example. If you heard before this morning, Dato Sri Wikasyong says there's a word called gig economy. We totally agree with this. With this technology, with this pandemic, the breakthrough through technology, this is possible. With gig economy, we need a fair deals. Example, we're actually doing services in the United States. We are doing services in the China, or China people do services in Malaysia. We need all this in place. I hope that actually answered the question. Yeah?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Poh, because you said that if we don't change, that's where we're going to go to fall behind. And then intervention will certainly be helpful. Right, next, may I have Pindar to share your thoughts, please?
Sorry, I didn't quite understand where we are in the agenda. Share the thoughts on.
Yeah, this is the third question, which is about,
see.
we have heard about, the big things about technology. We have heard about what we could do, in business and economy. What are those imperatives that we must actually look into in order to stay ahead? Then the next question is this: when people fall behind, right? So, what are those interventions that could be possible? Which one will thrive? Which one may not?
I don't really have a good answer for you for that. I mean, I would look at it slightly differently. I worry about the gray economy, people who are less able to evolve to this tech future that we keep talking about. And they're the ones who are affected by this. In a world where I perceive that we'll have inflation coming forward, I think technology for cost savings is one of the very strict metrics that people will use But I don't have a good answer for you, I'm afraid. I think it's very uncertain. That uncertainty drives costs. Those costs will need to be passed on. And it's going to be, unfortunately, adapt or die. And I think that's going to be very hard for a lot of people. We may all be in the gig economy, whether or not we like it or not.
You may touch on a little bit of what you talked about the other day, which is central bank digital currency, because you're touching that what they call the vulnerable group, the gray economy people who actually have to face rising costs of living, right?
Yeah, I mean, I perceive that we're going to be moving into sort of past this sort of transitory inflation to something akin to 2022 is what I call 1972, when we had the oil shock. We have the silicon shock, we have COVID shocks. All of that's just going to drive uncertainty. And so what I think is important here is that we have a network view, which will be diverse. So I don't have a solution, but some of my network people in my network might have a solution. With money being digitized, that will allow a lot of flexibility. When we have also common rules of origin, for example, RCEP, that will allow more degrees of freedom to solve these challenges, which will continue to evolve. So, multiple strategies, being very flexible, I think will be key. And I'm not quite sure what the new metrics are. I'm very enamored with this carbon zero, because I think that it really is the meter by which we should view success and failure at a species level.
Right, thank you, Pindar. May I invite Ms. Mei Ling, please?
Yeah, I think tourism, conference like this, business travel, very vulnerable. We've already seen the devastating impact due to COVID. It will take time to recover. And in fact, it will transform. The other place is that cyber attacks on businesses and individuals will increase. So we have to be much more careful. And we have no good international coordination to go after the ransomware companies today. So until the international governments come together, that will continue to be a problem. What will thrive is remote services, digital services, but new types of regulation. So there's been tremendous disruption in China. In fact, this wonderful thing about Alibaba, AntPay, Tencent, enabling tens of millions of small, medium enterprises to get financing, but suddenly the regulators come in and they're not quite sure how this is going to happen. So regulation is going to be a big disruptive force that we actually can't anticipate how each country is going to respond. India is doing their own version of this. So finally, digital standards will allow the flow of information between countries, but countries want to control what information goes in and out, just like they control what goods go in and out. How will all of this work out? It's going to be an exciting time. Back to you.
Right, thank you. Wow, some of those are really very real issue, like for example, cyber attack, ransomware, how are we going to address this? And then regulation, that at times may also be a disruption to the industry, especially the disbursement of the micro loan example that you have given. So therefore, we really need to relook at this, and digital standards that you talk about allow freer flow of the information. Right, thank you. May I invite Professor Barbara next?
Yes, one of the important outcomes of the pandemic is the increased role of government in the economy and in business. And that's true across the board, regardless of the political and economic system. So I think industries and, and sectors that fall within the national agenda would really thrive. I mean, the obvious example is the semiconductor industry. But at a different level, it also applies to subsectors. Say, take Thailand and tourism, which is so important to the country. In the new government national agenda, there is something called the BCG economic model, which is bio-circular green economic model. which Thailand is making it a theme of the APEC 2022, hoping that other countries, other members of APEC would adopt. And under this national agenda, it's not just tourism will thrive, but particular subsectors like green tourism and wellness tourism will be, specially promoted. So that's how I see one of the ways to identify the sectors that will thrive.
Right, thank you, Prof. For once, I thought that you are promoting for BCG Consulting, but it turns out to be a different thing because that includes a secular.
Yes, it's the same.
I know, secular, green, audit economy, and the green tourism. Thank you. Next, George. Yeah.
I keep it fairly short. In the end, I do believe every industry and economy has a chance. What it requires is clear leadership, which involves having a clear target, a clear long-term plan. It will require for leaders who are also digital savvy and understand and are willing to learn to really bring those industries, those companies, and those economies forward.
George, thank you. You touched on the topic very close to my heart. That's the need for digital leadership, a very clear leadership, a plan for long term, and execute them. Thank you. Next, we shall invite Matthew, please.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of industry, a lot of vertical industries, right? My view is usually the more vulnerable segment are the receiving ends. Take the example of the financial world, which I'm more familiar with. We've been forever talking about the underserved or unbanked segments, right? Usually they're poorer people, but often they're not. These underserved segments, they also financially illiterate. So while we're talking about very good financial inclusion, I mean, you see the example in China, right? So this so-called gray area, the tech companies coming, I mean, typically the private sector segments, I mean, you can't blame them. They are profit driven, right? They are bottom line driven. So some of the company might use this domination of the data to monetize and to the extent of almost like exploring the underserved market in the name of financial inclusion, right? So this is exactly where the government needs to, again, step in. Obviously, the balance is tricky, but there is a role for the government to help this so-called more vulnerable segment. Again, the topic very, very hot, becoming very, very hot recently this year, buy now, pay later, right? So it's across the world, mark my word for it, mark Dato, 18 months down the track, you will see a lot of hardship will be caused by this so-called, buy now, pay later product suite, right? And so financial inclusion and financial literacy go hand in hand. This exactly is my earlier point about government's role to ensure the social responsibility of these tech companies. And in this country, in Malaysia, I personally see that the segment, the SME segment, especially when it comes to cross-border trade, the so-called the supply chain finance is becoming going to be a crucial element in order to recover post-pandemic, right? Again, the government needs to step in to ensure that data is easily collaborated across different segments to ensure the data flow and the data transparency. You can utilize some of this technology I mentioned in blockchain, which is based on zero trust, right? To ensure that the cost and transparency of this cross-border trade for SME is more freely flow, right? So I'll stop there that way.
Yeah, thank you. You touch on, these vulnerable groups will be those underserved, lower income group, and they tend to have a higher cost of getting everything. And then you have also warned that buy now, pay later may potentially result in some much bigger issue that we have yet to see. Thanks for that warning. I think we better take note of that, and perhaps the regulators and policymakers may have to pay more attention to this area. Okay, so next, may I invite CS, please.
Hi, guys. Yeah, so perhaps from business perspective, perhaps the best way to boost digital uptake is basically to constantly ask yourself, what would the client expect from us, right? what the client expect from you to actually create better experience for them. So by simply allowing this sort of constantly ask questions to yourself will actually lead to decision making that will actually boost innovation in how you use digital tools in the way you apply to your businesses. But of course, from a business owner perspective, it's always a constant the kind of desire to actually adopt new technologies. You need to have constant training, upskilling. And of course, from the government perspective, you can definitely help the whole economy per se, by providing more SMEs with technology support assistance, encouraging training, upskilling, building a data culture perhaps, and ultimately raising a digital security profile for all SMEs. So these are some of the areas that will definitely create the uptake in comes to digital technologies, both when it comes to the business owner mindset as well as from a macro perspective will be the government initiative as well. Thanks.
Well, thank you, CS. You know, just now I somehow missed Mr. Chu, so come back to Mr. Chu. Thank you.
Thank you. Keep the best for the last, right? Yep, I think most of the speakers already covered the most vulnerable sectors. Let me touch base a little bit on how the Malaysian government actually helped the SME through grants. I think all of you agree that the SME and the micro SMEs are the ones that are most vulnerable and really need help. And I'm great that our government have actually come up with many stimulus package through Banjana to give up a matching grant to SME and mid-tier companies. For example, the smart automation grant is offered by MIDA, up to a maximum grant of 1 million per companies to assist companies to automate and digitize their operation, productions, and trade channel for better efficiency and productivities. But unfortunately, due to overwhelming interest, I understood that the program is temporarily put on pause due to lack of funding. So I hope the government can do more on this. And but apart from the government, I think the bigger corporations, GLC and multinational companies should also play their roles to build a stronger ecosystem by helping the SMEs. I'm also great to know that Intel is going to invest $7 billion in Penang to create 3,000 jobs. But I'm curious, how much of these $7 billion will create the spillover effects to the local SMEs? I will love to learn about that and see how through this investment, our local ecosystem will get stronger and stronger. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, Mr. Chu, you touched on the FDI spillover effect and also the grant of the government. Now, I think we have like 5 minutes left. There's also a question from the floor. And there's one question about talent that I'd like to use a rapid fire format. That means everyone just one sentence, right? All the speakers here, just one sentence about talent. What are those critical competencies and skills needed in this digital era? And also how to get there fast. One sentence, starting from Mr. Goh.
Hi, I see everything as an S-curve, whether it's a macro S-curve or a micro S-curve, or whether it is technology S-curve, or whether it is a system S-curve. Everything is an S-curve. A person who can firmly overcome an S-curve is a talent in that particular area.
Wow. Okay, next, Mr. Po.
Okay, thanks, Dato Moderator. I just would like to start with 2 words: data, AI. Okay.
All right, thank you, Pindar.
Resiliency, don't look for shortcuts, they don't exist. You'll save a lot of time not looking for them. Thank you.
Short courses, all right. Thank you. Amelie?
How do you build trusted relationships when you don't meet face-to-face?
All right, trusted relationship. And Professor Barbara?
I see 2 foundation universal skills. One is the digital literacy for everyone and digital intelligence, the sort of thing we talk about for as many people as possible. To get there fast, we need the involvement of whole society.
Wow, brilliant. Digital intelligence. George, please.
Digital curiosity, but also ethical standards.
Whew. Curiosity and standard, digital. I mean, yes. Matthew?
So the technologies such as AI, blockchain, cloud computing, and data will be immersed into our daily life. It's almost like everyone knows how to use Excel, Word. It will be like that. It will be just a simple toolkit cut across different industries going forward.
Right. Thank you. Mr. Chu?
Yeah, I think people said about lack of talent, but I don't think that we don't lack of talent, we just lack of talents that with a compassionate heart. So compassionate innovation is the way forward. We need more talents that are, become the force for good so that our world will not have to face another COVID pandemic moving forward. Thank you.
Compassion together with technology. Wow. CS.
Yeah, whether from a perspective from employee or business owners, you just got to very much grow and scale fast.
Okay, thank you. The last 2 minutes that we have a question from Maggie coming from some overseas somewhere. Question is this: there is a clearer new tension between the power of big tech versus that of government. To all the panelists here, everyone, just one sentence. What do you see the resolution to this tension between big tech and the government? Mr. Goh?
Well, I think if time will solve the time chaos.
Okay. All right. Yeah, Mr. Poh.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we need to know that technology is unavoidable. But we as a technology implementer always have a mindset of humanitarian. Whatever things that we do, is it benefiting the mankind? If yes, just do it, everything will be okay. Yeah.
Right, thank you. Pindar?
I would say tax. Tax is the purview of government. And obviously with tax revenue, you can redistribute it in society. These global platforms are now meta-national. And so we need to look at what sovereign ways are still left for nation state actors to enforce their ethics and their rules within their borders. Thank you.
Wow, tax as a solution. Thank you. Mei-Lin?
Data up to now really has been collected by for-profit entities. I see the swing back of the pendulum where data cooperatives amongst local communities will show new ways of organizing and doing governance. And data cooperatives will be then linked inside each country so that the national governments can actually have more oversight over the data generated by its citizens.
All right, thank you. And moving on, Professor Barbara.
I see lots of tension between centralization, big tech, and decentralization. And frankly, I don't know which one is easier for government to manage and control, because the trend towards decentralization may also apply to future governance structure.
All right, thank you, George.
It's a very, very difficult one. Maybe the only thing is that global technology companies are far more global than governments, who think sometimes a bit more insular. So if governments are acting more globally, they might actually close the gap.
Global government, wow. All right, Matthew.
Well, the role of a sovereign centralized government in a decentralized, maybe sometimes dominated by some of these tech giants, which are probably profit-driven, is exactly to strike the right balance to ensure the social responsibility adhere to, and to ensure that the more vulnerable segments are actually, supported and looked after, right? So there's always a right balance to ensure a good technology. I like one of the speakers says the passion, right? The passionate and good technology can be ensured maybe sometimes by the government, because they are not profit-driven.
All right, thank you. Rebalancing. Mr. Chu.
Yeah, we humans are social beings. We create technology to make our life easier and more convenient. But technology can never replace the warmth we could have in the in-person interactions. So that is the short.
Thank you, Mr. Chu. And then CS.
Yeah, so very much the tension between government and tech giants, as we all know it, is very much in data privacy. So it's always a paradox, right? You do not want to impede the growth in the expense of data privacy, or you do not want to grow too much, but then, again, in the expense of data privacy. So it's all about governments. It's all about governance. I think what's happening now is a good check and balance. It's probably going to be a constant struggle, but at the end of the day, it's actually good for all of us to find the right balance.
Right, thank you, CS. So I think we have covered all the questions that so far have been kind of posted here. Mr. MC, our time's up, right? I think with that, I would like everyone to join me to thank all our distinguished panelists for their wisdom and insight. Thank you. And back to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wei, and thank you to our panel for speaking on ways to develop